Okay. Thank you. So, my name is Hunnings, as you can see on the screen. I am a solicitor, and what I'm doing today is giving some information about the SQE, QWE, and exemptions. There'll be a long Q&A session afterwards where I'll be going through the questions that you put into the chat and doing my best to answer them. Now, I am not the SRA. I do my best to get the information and tell people about it. But ultimately, I have some people joining the coming late, so welcome latecomers. Fantastic. Please keep yourselves on mute. Okay, thank you. Right, so a little bit about myself to start off with. I'm a solicitor, qualified in 1992. Someone mute. You're being recorded, thank you. Right. Qualified in 1992. I spent 24 years in private practice. I was an equity partner, part owner of a law firm. I was on the board. I ran a department of 60 staff. I'm a litigator. That's my professional background. After that, I left and set up a management consultancy. And what we do is we help businesses in the legal sector with the business of running their business. A lot of compliance, work with case management systems, setting up law firms, those sorts of things, and also a lot of work around and about the SQE and the QWE. How did I get into that? One of our law firms actually is a firm of paralegals, and the principal saw that this new SQE thing that was coming in, which might then enable him to qualify. And he reached out to me to say, look, I need to have qualifying work experience, don't have anyone to confirm it, but I can reach out to someone external. That caused me to then look into this, and I've ended up by chance becoming a subject expert on this. Okay, so that's the general background. Now, I'm going to move on to talking about what is the SQE. I will be using our website because there's a lot of information on there as a resource, and I will tomorrow put a post up on LinkedIn, and for those who emailed us, for whom we emailed out the link, I'll also email out the link to all the links to you there of what I'm going to be showing. So we've got that information there. There is also, if I now start to share my screen, minimize that down here, and what I will do is minimize this as well, so we're not seeing all the pictures. So that's our website. We also have a channel on YouTube with lots of videos about SQE and QWE. So you've got information on there. We're even on TikTok, amazingly. So there you go. So this is us. A lot of compliance support that we do for law firms, data protection, sanctions, anti-money laundering. Most of it is based around English and Welsh law. Some of it, like data protection, cybersecurity, and such like, is global. Consulting services, okay, setting up law firms, quality marks, Excel, CQS, and such like. And also work around the SQE QWE. Lots of blogs with information, some of which I'm going to be accessing to help us with what we're doing here today. Right, what is the SQE? Let me go back a little bit further before I go into that. The legal profession, well, in the UK, there are 4 jurisdictions. Someone is not on mute. Please, can you mute yourself? Thank you. There are 4 legal jurisdictions in the UK. There's no such thing as the UK jurisdiction. There's the English and Welsh jurisdiction, which is pretty, so there's 3 jurisdictions, English and Welsh. There's Scotland and there's Northern Ireland. Okay, There is some distinction between England and Wales, but as far as the jurisdictions are concerned, that's the case. Now, the legal profession within England and Wales is divided into two. There's barristers who are specialist advocates and solicitors who are far more numerous. They do some advocacy, but they will do a lot of other things: transactional work, corporate, property work, wills and probate, litigation, all of those sorts of things. The regulatory body for solicitors is the SRA, Solicitors Regulation Authority, and they are in charge of who is admitted and remains on the roll as a solicitor. Okay. In September 2021, they changed the method for you to qualify as a solicitor, and they brought in the SQE, which replaced the LPC route. Now, there is a transition going on at the moment. The transition period runs to the end of the decade. So there are people who are qualifying through the old LPC route, and there are increasing numbers now qualifying through the SQE. At a certain point, people won't be able to qualify under the LPC route. They will have to qualify through the SQE route. Indeed, someone who is starting their degree from after September or October, that period, 2021, will have to qualify through the SQE route. Okay. What's involved in the SQE? Okay, so I've got this little thing up here to help us see this. There are 4 elements to qualifying through the SQE route as a solicitor of England and Wales. You have to have a degree or degree equivalent. Okay, you have to pass the SQE 1 and SQE 2 exams. You have to have 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience, which is confirmed to the SRA by an SRA-regulated solicitor. And then there's some sort of declaration of good faith, good character. They'll check your DBS and such like. It might be that the SRA will ask you to take some sort of test to prove that you can read and speak English. And that's particularly the case if you've got exemptions, so they're not able to test that in examinations. That is what it is. I can see the logic, because if you're going to be a solicitor of England and Wales, it's logical that you should be able to communicate well in English or Welsh. Anyway, I don't get involved in that. I'm just telling you about that. That's between you and the SRA. A degree or degree equivalent. Okay, so this is quite a change, degree or degree equivalent. Now I'm starting to use our website where you can search for stuff. I happen to have that search term in there already. There is a post on that. Under the old scheme, you used to have a law degree. Notice they're not saying law degree at all. So degree or degree equivalent. Now, you may have heard of the GDL, which was a converter course under the old route, the LPC route. That's not required. Okay, so you just need to have a degree or degree equivalent, and you may well have to validate it. And this is because the SRA don't know whether, you know, qualifications in another country are necessarily going to be at the same level. So you can see here, I've taken information from the SRA pages and put it into here to try and make it simpler. There is an organization, there's a small fee to be paid that can validate your degree. Okay, so for those who didn't know about that, that's where it is, that's what it's about. You don't need to do any converter course. That's that. Now, the next thing is the exams, and there's quite a change here. The LPC was written and examined by different training organizations. The SRA has taken back control and said, look, we're the authority who's responsible, so therefore we will be the authority that does and manages the examining. Okay, so there's one exam that everyone sits. There's no different variants. It's the SQE 1 and the SQE 2. So I brought this one up here already. What is the SQE exam? And we'll go on to QWE in a moment. There are 2 exams, the SQE 1 and the SQE 2. These are administered by Kaplan on behalf of the SRA. There is an exam fee, that's the current, and then moving into the new fees there. The SQE 1 is a multiple choice exam. 2 exams, each of 180 multiple choice questions, and it's tough. It's testing you on the actual law, English and Welsh law, in these areas here. Okay, now these can be sat in the Pearson View Centres in the UK and overseas. Okay, so I'm not answering individual questions at the moment. I'll pick that up in the Q&A, okay? But please do put them in. So the SQE one, you can sit that in the Pearson View Centres. You don't have to travel to the UK for this. Multiple choice questions, but it's very specific. Like, for example, down to the level of, in this type of property transaction, which part of which page would you fill in? And usually they have 2 answers that could be correct. The pass mark so far of those sitting the SQE1 exams, and there's been, I think, 3 now sat and marked, is around about 55%-ish. So it's actually slightly lower percentage pass rate than the LPC. So that's the SQE1, which you can sit abroad. You don't have to travel to the UK for it. It's sat in the Pearson View Centres. You cannot apply to sit the SQE2 until you've passed the SQE1. The SQE2 exam is the end of process exam. And they are testing you to see whether they think that you are of a level to be let loose on the public, basically. So it's testing you on the application of your knowledge into 16 real life scenarios. 12 of those are written and 4 of those are oral. And they, for example, I've heard from one person who said there was a court scenario and they were surprised because the judge interrupted them because the clients didn't cooperate with them. I said, that's life. So that was probably more realistic than you perhaps were expecting. But that's it. They want to see how you will perform. So it's testing you on soft skills as well as in these areas of law. Now, before anyone asks, why isn't family, why isn't immigration in there? I have no idea. I have asked them twice in one webinar and they ignored me purposefully, I think. So bizarre that they don't have family in there, which is such a big area of law. But there we go. It is what it is. You probably have enough to study in there anyway. So the SQE2, now the results for the SQE2 come out, I think, after about 3 months after the exam, which is a long time. But the SQE2 is quite subjective because they're looking at you performing. There we go with those exams. Now, whilst we're talking about exams, there is a page up here that we put on our website for purely for information for you guys. I've tried to list the main training providers who are not universities. There's too many at universities. So there are more than there were under the old LPC. And they'll deal with things in different ways. Some of them are completely virtual. So we put on here just an information page we've done some of the legwork for you. You'll need to do your own investigation. We give an idea of the indicative price and some of the background of where they've come from. And the prices can vary hugely from over 10,000 to much lower figures for the training. And there's a link to the website. So that's up there. It will be in that post that we'll put up tomorrow on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all the other things like that of the URLs on there. So that's just to help you with getting training for the exams. Okay, now the third element is qualifying work experience, which causes no end of confusion. Qualifying work experience. So you need to have 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience confirmed to the SRA by an SRA-regulated solicitor. Okay, now it's important that they're regulated by the SRA because they can discipline us if we are abusing the system. Okay, a barrister won't count. A Scottish qualified lawyer won't count. It needs to be someone regulated by the SRA. Now, you can reach out outside of your organization to have an external solicitor confirm your qualifying work experience. And indeed, I provide that service. At the moment, I think I'm the only person providing that service. And again, that link will be, there we go, in the URL sent round. But so far, we have, I have confirmed the qualifying work experience of 57 aspiring solicitors from around the world. I've got another 2 just finishing, one from Hong Kong, one from France, and many others in train. So I always offer a free, no obligation Zoom call to go through checking whether what they're doing is, in my opinion, qualifying work experience, and then going through the process. Yes, we do charge for that, but not for the initial free Zoom call. Information is on here. The QWE, for it to be QWE, it has to be the provision of legal services. Okay, but it can be done it doesn't have to be in English law or Welsh law. It doesn't have to be done in a law firm. It doesn't have to be done in the England and Wales. It doesn't even have to be paid. It can be voluntary. And you can reach back in time as far as you want for your qualifying work experience. The problem is, if you reach back a long time back in time, if you're asking an external confirming solicitor to do the confirmation, they will have to see the work, and you may have difficulty accessing that to show them if it's a long time back. So there's some logistical issues there, but there's the SRA are not putting a barrier in the way there. So there's a huge amount of flexibility around that. It is something that law firms do not understand. So expect ignorance, expect that you will be educating them about all of this. But that's that element there. The easiest, of course, is to have a solicitor who is in your organization confirm your QWE, and most people will have that proceeding in that way, because they'll be working in an English or Welsh law firm. There'll be solicitors there who can confirm your qualifying work experience. If they refuse for no good reason, then the SRA wants to know. It becomes an ethics issue, and ultimately could end up in the Solicitors Disciplinary Tribunal. So, yeah, the SRA take a very dim view about solicitors holding back paralegals because they, I don't know, want to exploit them. I've seen that, and you may have seen me ranting on LinkedIn sometimes about that. So, if you're finding you're in that situation, feel free to reach out, and I'll talk you through the options. Yeah, it shouldn't happen. The SRA wants to make it easier for people to proceed, providing they meet the standards, because there's an awful lot of people who are held back under the old LPC route. There are some stats that are somewhere between 20 and 40% of the people who passed LPC exams each year could not find a training contract under that old route. Now, the SRA feels that that is awful, inappropriate, and this way you control much more of your own career. For example, you could be working as a paralegal in-house in a firm in Dubai, and now you think, oh, I can qualify. I don't have to give up my career, move my family to England to work as a trainee for a couple of years. Now you can bring that expertise into the legal profession here, which is fantastic. Okay, we've talked about the main elements for qualifying as an English solicitor. One other thing, whilst we're talking about that, is apprenticeships. Now, this is particular to people who live in England, Wales a bit. It's slightly different in Wales. Doesn't apply, I think, to people who are in Scotland, and certainly not people who are overseas. The SRA has been very careful to make sure that the SQE fits within the UK government's apprenticeship scheme, which has been around for decades. So for the first time, people who want to qualify as lawyers can avail themselves of this. The benefit of this is that if you go through the system as it would be a graduate apprentice, so you wouldn't have to join at the age of 16, you would join after your degree. Your tuition fees and your exam fees will be paid for, which is massively helpful. 95% is paid for by the state, and the other 5% is paid for by your employer, although they can get an apprenticeship credit so that they don't even pay that. I'm not going to go into the detail of it. There's a whole article of it, about this on here, which you can read. Again, massive ignorance about this out there. It would be your employer who puts you on as an apprentice, and they would need to have either the University of Law or BPP, who would be the apprentice training organisation, who would then help them through that process. Okay, I have a contact at the University of Law who is the person for one to be put in touch with if that's relevant. So don't forget apprenticeships. It's a hugely valuable tool in there. And for employers, if there are any employers there, this can help make your paralegals be more sticky and stick with you at least through the training and qualification period. Okay, so that's what the main elements are for qualifying through the SQE. So what I'm going to do now is move away from that and on to the topic of exemptions. So I'll start with, and those people who are just joining late, please can you put yourself on mute? We have a lot of people on this Zoom, and so we can only really cope if you're on mute. If you have a question, please put it into the chat, and I'll work through the questions then in a Q&A after this. Again, I'm afraid with you silent, but me answering what you've written. This is being recorded, so if people want to have a copy of the recording afterwards, then they should email, and the best thing to do is, if we go down here, email me. This is my email address, and then we can send that out to you. We will send you a link to the recording, which will keep there for 7 days, and then we'll delete the recording. So you will need to download it within that time period. Okay, so we've gone through the elements of the SQE and what's involved in that. I'm just moving on now to the exemptions. So let's start with the SQE 1 exam. If you passed your LPC, the SRA is highly likely to give you exemption from the SQE 1 exam. Okay. So you have to ask for it. It doesn't happen automatically, but you should be given exemption from the SQE. I'm just trying to get back to what I'm looking for here. It's the next one before that. So now the SQE 1, if you passed your MCT under the QLTS scheme, there's a few people who've been caught in this. I think really the SRA forgot about this when they brought in the SQE. You can get exemption from SQE 1, but it's really very, very limited. So if I just go on a different screen here and go to MCT, little MCT tour now, I'm afraid. Very specific. I have asked the SRA, I've asked them again to double check, and I only spoke with someone from South Africa just today about this. It is what it is. So if you pass the MCT but you did not pass the OSCE, you're in this limbo. Now you have two options really for you. Where is it here? You can either go down the transitional route where you get exemption from the SQE 1 and have to sit and pass the SQE 2 and apply for admission before the 31st of March 2024. So that window is closing. Alternatively, if you're in this scenario, you can just say, stuff it, I'll follow the SQE route and I'll take and pass the SQE 1. Because you're a foreign qualified lawyer, by definition, because you were going through the QLTS route, you will then be able to apply for the SQE 2 exemption from the SQE 2 exam, which I'll talk about in a moment. Okay, so that's that. Now, it is open to foreign qualified lawyers to apply for exemption from SQE 1 as well as SQE 2. We don't help with that. I think the likelihood of you getting exemption from both exams is very, very small. Indeed, the SRA have told me that. and it's really hard to get exemption from SQE1. You've got a huge dossier of paperwork to pull together. It's not that different from the equivalent means and all the effort you had to do for that under the LPC route. It's, yeah, good luck, but yeah, there we go. Right, so that's SQE1. SQE2, can you get exemption from that? Yes, you can, but this is largely only open to people who are foreign qualified lawyers. Okay, so let's go into consulting services. I have a page on here, SQE QWE exemptions. We do help people with SQE2 exemptions, but I put all the information up there free of charge for you. So who can apply for this? Foreign qualified lawyers and people who are other qualified. Now, I add that in because I was contacted by someone recently who had this confirmed to them. They were CLC qualified. I think it's the Council for Licensed Conveyancers. And they were told, yes, they can follow the same route because they are a lawyer. So it's not just foreign qualified lawyers, but they're going to be the vast majority of them. Okay, so you would have to sit the SQE1 unless you want to try and do that exemption. I've already spoken about that. If you are a foreign qualified lawyer wanting to apply for exemption from SQE2, then there is a form that you need to fill in, and I'll pull that form up in a moment. It's downloadable from the obviously the SRA website, but I've also put it in here. You would need to fill in sections 1 to 4, which is all about you and your current qualification. Then either section 7A, which means that your 2 years professional legal experience was gained as part of your qualification. I'll take South Africa and their jurisdiction again as an example. In South Africa, very much like under the old LPC in England, you have to do be a trainee for 2 years as part of your qualification before you can qualify. Okay, so that would be really simple filling that in there, and you've got to pay their fee. Okay, 7B is instead where your 2 years professional legal experience was gained after you qualified. So that's what you fill in there, and then you have to do some extra stuff. As well as the form and paying the fee, you've got to get a reference letter from your supervisor, which has certain content that needs to be in there, and you need to submit a certificate of good standing for you from your local bar or law society or governing body, and for your supervisor if a lawyer. But your supervisor does not have to be a lawyer. Okay, I'm not going to go into more detail on that at the moment. 7C is a combination of those. 8, you'd only fill in if you don't yet have 2 years professional legal work experience. This is different from the QWE because you are exempt as a foreign qualified lawyer from the QWE requirements. So it is different, although it sounds vaguely similar. So if you don't have 2 years professional legal work experience, you fill in section 8, which is a complete pain. So I would say probably get your 2 years. There's the form. So let me spend a little bit of time just taking you through the form. Okay. Section 1, really easy, who you are. Section 2, about your jurisdiction and whether your qualification gives you rights to do all of these things. 2.2, okay? If it doesn't, you may have to fill in section 8 or part of section 8 to explain how you have that experience, okay, which then justifies you being granted an exemption from the SQE2 exam. Remember, the fallback is the SRA says sit the exam, okay? 3 is about your ethics, 4 is what you're asking for, so SQE2. 5 and 6 is all about, you see how long it is, applying for exemption from SQE1. I wouldn't do it. We don't support it. You know, you're on your own. Good luck. So section 7 is where it's really, really simple. You're just filling that stuff in here, which I just ran through. And then section 8, if you don't yet have 2 years professional legal work experience, then you're filling in examples, referencing them across, and all this stuff in here, which is, again, loads of work. Right, okay, so I've covered the exemptions in there. A little point about people who come from ex-Soviet jurisdictions. In these countries, and there is somewhere in here, I should be able to find it, there we go, a blog on that. Your profession is divided. When you qualify, so when you pass your law degree, you can act as and you're accepted as a lawyer in your country. But there's another level you can get to after taking further exams, which makes you advocates. And so this creates an issue as to how can you get a certificate of good standing when there is no professional body for you, because those people who have just passed the law degree and then become lawyers have no professional body. So there's some information about that in here. The SRA are quite flexible. They will take proof that you passed the exam and such like, but do be aware it may not give you the ability to cover all of those practice areas that we referred to up here earlier on with your application for exemption. For example, criminal litigation. So you may have to fill in Section 8 of that application form, but at least you can move forward, whereas otherwise you couldn't. And again, the link to that article we'll put into that blog with all of the links in tomorrow. Right, so we've looked at what is qualifying, sorry, what is the SQE. Where's that? Up there. We looked at the elements, okay. We've gone through those in some detail. We've looked at exemptions from SQE 1 and SQE 2. Reminding you that we do help people if they need it with the application for exemption from the SQE 2 exam. We also do a lot of work with confirming the qualifying work experience for non-qualified people who need to have their QWE, their 2 years full-time equivalent QWE. We act as external confirming solicitors for that, and so feel free to approach me if that's relevant, or indeed signpost people through to us. So I think I've gone through what I wanted to as far as talking is concerned. Let me start now to go through the chat with the questions you've been putting on there, and I will do my best to answer them. Bear in mind, I won't know everything. I'm not the SRA, I'm just doing my best, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is talk to this rather than going to different screens, because I found that in the past, when I go away to a screen, I then find difficulty in actually being able to find where I am in the questions. It causes a little bit of confusion there. So what I'm just going to do in the background is bring this up so that we have, let's say, my email there in case you want to reference that, okay, from there. So let's start at the beginning of this. First question, does my degree need to be verified if I have a qualifying degree from the UK? I'm not sure. It's a good question. And the trouble is I can't test this because I'm already qualified. I qualified in 1992. The best thing to do is to go to my SRA profile on the SRA website and put it in and see if that works. I suspect that it should be okay, but until someone tells me, I don't know, I'm afraid. So that's, yeah, I hope that helps. Right, the next question. Can you obtain an exemption from SQE 1 if you have passed the MCT exam? I think I covered that, but I'll go back over that. So you can. There are two routes if you pass the MCT, reminding you that this is the QLTS route for foreign qualified lawyers to qualify as solicitors of England and Wales under the old regime, which finished when the SQE came in September 2021. So a lot of people were left hanging there part the way through passing that. They passed the MCT, but hadn't passed the second element, which was the OSCE. So the SRA have been quite clear on this. There are two options for you. The first option, the window is closing. because you have to have done everything and apply for admission by the 31st of March next year, 2024. So if you follow that route, you can get exemption from SQE1, but you will have to sit and pass the SQE2 and apply for admission by the 31st of March 2024. The alternative is you say, okay, I'm going to go the full SQE route, and I'll sit the SQE1 because I can do that from abroad without having to travel to the UK, and then I can apply for exemption from the SQE2. And by the way, you can apply for exemption from SQE2 before you sat SQE1. But if you've already got exemption from SQE1 and then apply for exemption from SQE2, the SRA will, as the lady was telling me this morning, remove the exemption from SQE1 because they don't want you to be exempted from everything. They need to examine you on something. Okay. Right. Is there a time limit within which the two exams need to be given, sat? I'm not entirely sure without researching again the SRA website. I think I saw something on a WhatsApp chat today of 6 years. There are a certain number of resits you can do. But if you got an exemption, it seems as though you got an exemption, because I've heard of people getting exemptions from the LPC, which they sat a decade ago. Not logical as far as I'm concerned, because your knowledge of the law will get out of date, but that seems to be the case. That's the best I can answer that, I'm afraid, at this stage. Next question. How can you provide QWE certification from an SRA-regulated lawyer if your experience was abroad, say India, and your supervisor was Indian? Okay, that's good. I didn't cover that when I was talking about the QWE. Qualifying work experience is you obtaining certain skills, which is preparation for the SQE2 exam, when the SRA, well, the examiners will be checking that you exhibit those skills when they're looking to see if you're good enough to be let loose on the public. It's not testing, the qualifying work experience is not testing you on English law. So that means that someone who is in India, who is not qualified, and who has been doing, let's say, paralegal work or working in a legal advice center or what have you, maybe in-house, they've been doing those skills, had the opportunity to acquire those competencies is the terminology they use. Now, if there's an English or an SRA regulated solicitor in the organization in India, they can confirm that qualifying work experience to the SRA. If there isn't, that person can reach out to an external solicitor to have that confirmed. As an external solicitor, confirming solicitor, we are required to do more than an internal. An internal knows you, they've supervised you, they've seen the work. It's a very simple process. As an external, we haven't been there. So the SRA requires us to see the work, which I usually do on a Zoom call with you, sharing the work with me. Sharing images of it so that I can see it, so it never actually travels to me. And then the other thing the SRA requires me to do is to get feedback from your supervisor. And I will be asked about those when I am doing the confirmation of your qualifying work experience on the SRA website. So I hope that answers your question. Otherwise, reach out to me and we can organize a one-to-one Zoom to go through things, particularly if you have QWE that needs to be confirmed. However, if you're Indian qualified as a lawyer, that's not relevant, because in India, if you're a foreign qualified lawyer, you are exempt from the QWE element because you're already qualified. Next question. I'm studying law at the Open University, and in my final year, I have chosen the SQE route. Do you know if my student loan will include the tuition and examination fees that you referred to earlier on, or will I need to graduate from the OU first and then cross the bridge? I don't know. I have no idea. My suspicion is that your student loan covers you for your undergraduate degree. The SQE is a postgraduate qualification and therefore would be subject to other funding wherever you can get it from. I've mentioned the apprenticeship route. Some of the maybe top 50 law firms will very kindly pay for their quotes trainees. And by the way, the phrase trainee has no meaning under the SQE. They can call you that. Many people are settling on the term aspiring solicitor. They can call you what they want, but under the LPC, trainee had a specific meaning within the SRA regulations. There is no specific meaning under the SQE, but I suspect, you know, the loan won't cover you. Ask the loan authority. I don't know. Next question. I am currently an executive PA to the founder and senior partner of Tiger Law. Welcome. I believe I practice relevant legal services, but will the SRA see this as valid work experience? It will be down to the judgment of the SRA-regulated solicitor who you are asking to confirm to the SRA your qualifying work experience. It's their judgment. I can only talk about my judgment on this if you were asking me. And that's why I do these initial free Zooms, I would need to assess what you were doing to see whether I thought it was the provision of legal services. And I'm looking out for it not being the provision of administrative services or the provision of financial services or the training on legal services, or you see where I'm going. It needs to be the provision of legal services. So if you're an executive PA, I've got alarm bells ringing there. So you would need to persuade me that you are doing the delivery of legal services. But without a one-to-one and detailed discussion on that, I couldn't tell you. But even if we did that, if I form an opinion that's not relevant, if you're going to ask your the senior partner of Tiger Law to do the confirmation, because it's their opinion that counts, because they're the ones who are accountable to the SRA if they do a spot check. I hope that helps. Next question. Is it necessary to join a law firm to gain relevant experience that is accepted for SQE? Imagine you mean the QWE element. Can't independent practitioners make themselves eligible to qualify SQE? Is working under a senior lawyer has no relevance importance while assessing qualifying work experience? I think if I paraphrase that, you're asking, do I need to work in a law firm to be gaining qualifying work experience, QWE? No, you don't. You can work in an advice center, you can work in-house, you could, I have helped some people who work as McKenzie friends. There are so many different ways that legal services are being provided, which I would never have thought about when I was working in a law firm. But it's amazing. I've worked with people who work in charities, who work for the UN, you know, yeah, wonderful, wonderful experiences. Many people working in-house as in-house counsel. So absolutely not. You don't just have to work in a law firm. And remember, it doesn't have to be just in England and Wales. It could be anywhere in the world. But it has to be the provision of legal services. I am LLB, LLM by qualification. Can I get SQE 1 or SQE 2 exemption? From those initials there, no. Because those are undergraduate degrees. SQE 1 and SQE 2 are postgraduate. So you need a degree, that's fine. A master's doesn't really get you anywhere with anything. I have heard of some universities still pushing them because they've rolled that into the LPC. And you know, I don't know if they're making money or quite what the story is in there, but no, LLM is master's in law. Absolutely right. Yeah, but it's still, I know it's post undergraduate, but it doesn't give you exemption from SQE 1 and SQE 2. I've explained how you get exemption from SQE 1. So that is either through having passed the LPC, filling in that horrendous form and with all the documentation, or in those limited circumstances, if you'd already passed the MCT as a foreign qualified lawyer. SQE 2 is only really available to exemption from SQE 2 is only really available to those who are already qualified as lawyers. Sorry, not my scheme, it's the SRA's. Okay, what if the law firm is not SRA regulated? Can I still gain my experience? Yes. I've answered that already, but just to run through that again, qualifying work experience is the ability to acquire the competencies required by the SRA for a solicitor to have, and will be tested in the SQE QWE exam. Qualifying work experience does not need to be done in a law firm, does not need to be done in English and Welsh law, does not need to be done in England and Wales. It can be done anywhere in the world. It does not even need to be paid. So it can be in a charity, it can be in-house in, let's say, Dubai, or I don't know, Rio de Janeiro, or wherever. Absolutely not. You don't have to just join a law firm, although of course many people will. What is the situation for Greek qualified lawyers? Now, there are some countries where, or some jurisdictions, I should say, where the SRA has already done a comparative qualification exercise, and they have given exemption already. Though for those countries, Brazil is one, Scotland is another, I think, where you just make the application through your My SRA profile, and you can get, you don't have to fill in the form for an individual application. I cannot remember if Greece has that exemption. I don't think it does, in which case you will need to fill in the form that I went through earlier on in the webinar, which you can access from our website and the SRA website, of course, to apply for exemption from SQE 2. You will, as a Greek qualified lawyer, be exempt from the QWE. You will probably have to sit the SQE 1, but you don't have to travel to the UK for that. You just need to do that through a Pearson View Centre, which is set up to do that. I don't know all the locations, but you can look that up. How would the qualifying work experience look like if you went down the citizens advice route? Well, citizens advice is actually an example that the SRA gave of a place where you could acquire qualifying work experience. I'm actually a trustee of a local citizens advice in North Oxfordshire, South Northants. But it still has to be qualifying, it still has to be qualifying work experience. It has to be the provision of legal services. So I would say that if you're working in citizen advice, volunteering or being paid, and you're just giving debt advice, that probably is not the provision of legal services. It's a provision of financial services, and therefore wouldn't apply. If you're training or providing training, again, that's not the provision of legal services. If, however, you're an advisor and you're advising on housing law, on landlord and tenant, on employment, on family law, on immigration law, and all those sorts of things, yes, that's likely to be the provision of legal services. Now, in that circumstance, you're unlikely to have a solicitor in the organization who can confirm your qualifying work experience. Feel free to reach out to me. I have confirmed the qualifying work experience of 3 off the top of my head people who've been working in citizens advices. Next question, lots about QWE. I am not surprised at all. How would the qualifying work experience look like if you went down? Oh, that's the same question. Okay, that's the same question. I've answered that. I studied law in India, did a 2-year TC training contract at a UK law firm. I have not done the LPC or GDL, and I am now an associate at a Magic Circle firm. What are the odds of getting an SQE 1 and SQE 2 exemption on the basis that my training is exactly the same as a UK lawyer? Okay. I don't think that you said that you were qualified as a lawyer anywhere.
Sorry, just to say that's my question. I am qualified as a lawyer in India.
Okay, thank you. In which case, you're qualified as a lawyer in India, you are exempt from the from the QWE, you can apply for exemption from the SQE 2 exam. There is the ability for you to apply for exemption from SQE 1 as well. Good luck, because you would need to satisfy the SRA that you have experience up to a really high level, level 3, they say in their standards, covering all areas of law. So corporate, commercial, property, private client, criminal, including attending police stations and such like. So if you've been doing 2 years training contract at did it cover all that? Or was it mainly corporate commercial? So that's where I'm thinking the reality of the situation is, as a foreign qualified lawyer, get your SQE 2 exemption, you'll probably have to sit the SQE 1. Next question. If you have 2 years experience, do you need to do SQE 1 or SQE 2 exams, or is there any exemption? If you're a foreign qualified lawyer, if it's 2 years post-qualification legal experience, then you should be able to get exemption from SQE 2. If it was part of your qualification, again, exemption from SQE 2. If it's a mixture of both, again, exemption from SQE 2. If you're not already qualified as a lawyer, you won't be able to apply for exemption from SQE 2. 2 years experience won't be relevant for applying for an exemption from SQE 1, I'm afraid. But that might be 2 years experience, which you anyway need if you're not qualified as a lawyer, as your qualifying work experience, because you need your 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience. I hope that helps. Next question. What if someone works in an immigration law firm who is regulated by the OISC, which is regulated by OISC? Do these 2 years qualify for the QWE? If yes, who needs to sign the QWE? Okay, so I have confirmed the QWE of aspiring solicitors in that exactly that situation. For people who don't know, some immigration law firms are regulated by this body, the OISC. Okay. Again, it goes down to whether it is the provision of legal services. So if all you've been doing is making copy and photocopying, that won't be the provision of legal services. It won't be QWE. If, however, you've been advising people on immigration process and law for applying for leave to remain and all the other stuff, you've been working as a normal case handler there, it is highly likely, in my view anyway, that that would be qualifying work experience. And providing I could see the evidence and I could speak to a supervisor, I wouldn't have a problem with confirming that qualifying work experience to the SRA. Next question. What kind of job does a person have to pass the QWE? I am a senior compliance in a law firm and would like to know if my role as compliance is enough to pass the 2 years QWE. Well, first point is that if it's a law firm in England and Wales, it's likely to be an internal solicitor regulated by the SRA who you're asking, and they would need to apply their judgment in answering that question. However, you could be abroad. It's a good question, and I do face this fairly frequently with the people whose QWE I confirm. To me, it's a question of, again, applying that definition. Is the work you're doing the provision of legal services or not? So I'll give you an example. There's a Magic Circle law firm that has an office in Hong Kong. Someone said to me, I am a conflicts consultant. And I went, what on earth is that? And he explained to me that his job was to check with a new client that the Hong Kong office wanted to act for, whether anyone in any of the other global offices acted for the other side in this transaction. Was there a conflict? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't see any legislation or law that you're applying here. There's internal regulations, but I think this is administrative services, not the provision of legal services. So I said no. However, if you're applying compliance, you're dealing with compliance to legislation on financial crime, sanctions, anti-money laundering, data protection, then yes, because you are looking at primary legislation and secondary legislation, which you're then interpreting and applying and advising on, even if it's in-house, because your client is your employer and your colleagues who you are advising. So that would, in my opinion, be the provision of legal services and therefore QWE. That's my opinion. If I'm confirming your QWE, of course, if you have a solicitor who you're asking in your organization, you need to ask their opinion, because they're the ones you're asking to do the confirmation. Next question. Is the EU law still part of the SQE exam? Sorry, I can't answer that. We don't train people for the exam. You need to ask one of the exam boards, one of the, not the exam boards, training providers about that. And I showed you there was a page where I put up the main SQE training providers. They'll know that. I don't. Sorry. I'm a lawyer qualified in Italy, but as an employee of a company, in-house legal advisor, under Italian law, I cannot register with the Italian Bar Association for reason of incompatibility. So I cannot provide any certification of registration from the Italian Bar Association. Can I still benefit from the SQE exemption? If you're accepted as an Italian qualified lawyer, the answer would be yes. If you're then, so you should be exempted from SQE, so from the QWE. Applying for exemption from SQE 2, it's likely the SRA will be flexible with regard to the certificate of good standing. It will be a question of liaising with them, but from my experience of dealing with people who are qualified in ex-Soviet countries, they have been flexible there. So I think, you know, this situation sounds familiar to that, and so I don't think you'll have any problems with that. If someone is a qualified foreign lawyer and during their qualification it was mandatory for a one-year practice with a qualified solicitor, what if the applicant, after got the qualification, came immediately to the UK and start working as an immigration advisor at an office of OISC regulated firm and is regulated as a UK immigration advisor? Could he or she be able to apply for an exemption from the SQE 2 exam? Let me go back, that was a very long question. Foreign qualified, yes, you can. You would probably be filling in section 7C of the application form, because part of your qualification was a mandatory part of your qualification process, and then the other legal professional work was done afterwards. So yes, you can apply for exemption from SQE 2, and it's probably section 7C of that form. Next question. Have you seen examples of firms funding SQE for foreign qualified lawyers who did not need QWE? I haven't, but I wouldn't. I would imagine probably the top 50 firms are the ones who fund people's, you know, trainees through their exams. I wouldn't know, honestly. It's really a question of asking the firm perhaps when you're applying for a job there. Next one. I am a foreign qualified lawyer in Kazakhstan. I worked more than 2 years in Kazakhstan, and currently I work in London for a global law firm as legal advisor, more than 4 years. My specialization is international arbitration, and currently I mostly advise on Kazakh law issues in international arbitration. Do you think I can apply for exemption from SQE 2 under section 7B? Is it enough to show a reference only from my current work in London? Let's go back and study that. You're a foreign qualified lawyer, so the application for exemption from SQE 2 is open to you. Your regulatory body, as your ex-Soviet Union, it's likely to be you're either qualified because you passed a law degree, or you've taken further exams to become an advocate.
Yes, I'm an advocate.
You're an advocate. Life is much easier for you then. Thank you. So you work in London. You've been there for 4 years. The period post qualification is a minimum of 2 years. You can take that from wherever it is. So yes, you could use that London experience and you could ask the supervisor there to sign the letter that you would, of course, draft for them as the reference letter. So yeah, use a London one. It's easier where you are currently, and they can sign that. And 7B is the one, the section that you would be looking at, as well as.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Can I have one additional question? Can I ask?
Okay. Yes.
So in Kazakhstan, we have two types of lawyers, like advocates who can practice criminal law, and also we have like legal advisor who can go to civil courts. So because I don't practice criminal law, I decided to be member of the bar of legal consultants. So will be its issue that
the question is really, as an advocate, are you entitled to practice as a criminal lawyer?
I only entitled if I be member, but I can be member, like go and submit application and be member immediately. But now I decided to be member of another association. So which, I don't know, should I change my membership to advocate association rather than legal?
My advice on that is, when you make the application, yes. And the reason is that if you have that lower tier of membership, then you don't have the right to practice criminal law. That means then you'll have to fill in section 8 as well of the form, with loads of evidence and stuff that you need to pull together to submit to the SRA. For you, you got the option of not having to do that just by changing your membership. I would do that, definitely, because it makes it much easier, much smoother for you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right. The next question is, the SQE website says the following, which seems to suggest that the reference can be given by a non-SRA lawyer. This is specifically to do with application for exemption from the SQE 2 exam, which is correct. It doesn't have to be an SRA lawyer. It doesn't have to be a qualified lawyer at all. It could be someone who's not qualified in any sense at all, or they could be qualified as an accountant, because your supervisor could be, let's say, the finance director or someone like that. So for the application for exemption from the SQE 2, you're quite right. It doesn't have to be a lawyer. If it is a lawyer, you would need to submit their certificate of good standing. If it's someone else, if someone has other professional qualifications, put them in. If they're not, then the SRA suggests that in the letter of reference that you should, or they should, explain why they're suitable to supervise you. And it goes on here, referees must confirm the dates they supervised you, total hours worked, have supervised you directly, make it clear that what the supervision arrangements were, include a summary of your role, description of the standard work. Yeah, I mean, you've copied that out of the SRA website, and you're quite right. I've got a digest of that on that page on our website. Yeah, you're quite right on that. So they don't have to be qualified as lawyers to be the supervisor. Next question. If I have passed the BVC, can I get any exemptions? The bar vocational course. I don't know, but I think the answer is no. The SRA are quite clear about this. It's their exam, it's not the bar exam. But you will have to ask them. It's not something I've ever investigated, but I suspect the answer is no. Next question. Any advice whether any of the following work experiences be applicable for QWE or SQE 2 exemptions? Point on SQE 2 exemption only if you're a foreign qualified, well, if you're already a qualified lawyer, foreign or other. Okay, going on to this, working as a part-time paralegal in London along with my LLM, work experience while studying LLB. Really, it could be QWE. It depends whether it falls within the definition of QWE. Is it the provision of legal services? If it is, then yes. And I'll give you an example. A lot of people go and do some work in a legal clinic whilst they're doing their degree. Now, cumulatively, you've got to see how many many weeks of full-time equivalent do you get, because your qualifying work experience, you have only 4 placements within which to gather your 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience. So if you have a full-time equivalent placement of 2 weeks, I would say don't bother, because it's too short and it's using up one of your 4 slots to get your 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience. But if it comes to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months full-time equivalent, definitely, and get that QWE confirmed before you leave the organization, because it's far easier than reaching back in time. Okay, next question. Does internship...
So as a part-time paralegal for over a year?
So what does that account to as full-time equivalent? So it could be that 1 year of part-time equates to 4 months full-time.
Exactly.
In my eyes, full-time is 30 to 35 hours a week. So it is a question of maths and juggling that, okay? So it's full-time equivalent. So you can work part-time, but you've got to accumulate those together. And the person who's going to be judging this is the confirming solicitor. Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. Going on to the next question. Does internship before acquiring a lawyer's license in India count as QWE? Yes, but if you've got a lawyer's license in India, i.e. you're qualified as a lawyer in India, you are exempt from QWE, so it's not relevant. If you're not qualified as a lawyer in India, you're unqualified as a lawyer anywhere, not qualified as a lawyer anywhere, then certainly it could count as QWE. Internships tend to be short periods though. So again, it's down to that calculation of figures. You know, if it's a 2-week internship, I wouldn't bother. If it's a 2-month, I might. If it's a 6-month internship, I probably would. Full-time equivalent I'm talking about here. Next question. I've already answered that, so I'll move on from that one. It's the same one repeated. Next question. Have you found those working in common law jurisdictions to have better chances of getting an exemption from SQE QWE? I don't think there's any difference whatsoever, because it comes down to meeting the criteria. So A, are you qualified as a lawyer? B, do you have the 2 years post-qualification or pre-qualification or a mixture of them legal work experience? And then can you get a supervisor to sign that letter of reference and the certificates of good standing, as I mentioned? So the jurisdiction really doesn't count. I think the point, your question really goes towards the exams, and I can't answer that. I don't know, possibly only the SRA has the stats, which they haven't shared on that. Next question. How will you be able to review our work if the manager of the firm doesn't allow us to share it with you due to confidentiality? Very good question. When I'm doing it, there are three things I say about the viewing of work when I'm confirming qualifying work experience as an external. I say, first of all, I won't have you send it to me. I will view it on your computer during a Zoom, so it stays in your domain on your computer. Secondly, I invite you to redact the document so I can't see the names of the parties. Thirdly, I am happy to sign a non-disclosure agreement, but I have to see the work because I have to confirm to the SRA that I've seen the work. So if you're working in a firm which is not regulated by the SRA, and the manager says no, I'm afraid you just have to give up that qualifying work experience because you can't get it confirmed. If you are in a firm where there is an SRA-regulated solicitor, then get it confirmed there. If it's an SRA-regulated law firm and the firm, the solicitors, are refusing to confirm your qualifying work experience, then that could potentially be an issue for SRA ethics, because unless they have a good reason, they should confirm your qualifying work experience. And I've had that confirmed even on a chat or post that I put on LinkedIn by someone from the SRA policy unit. They take a dim view of SRA regulated solicitors holding back unnecessarily people who want to proceed through the process to become qualified. I hope that covers all the angles of that question. Next question. In your opinion, is QWE limiting in the experience you would have as a new qualified if you've experienced only one area of law, IP, for example? I don't know. There's a couple of different things to be considered. The requirement under the LPC training contract for one to sit in different seats was removed many years ago. So that I think the SRA are recognizing the fact that in truth, many people specialize in an area and stick in that area. IP, for example, all the people I've worked with who are working in-house, for example. So why should they be forced to get experience in criminal law or in property law or in probate? So there's a strong argument to say, let them specialize. It's a little bit academic because I don't write the SRA's policies and procedures and I can't do anything about them. And the rules are what they are if you want to qualify as an English solicitor. So it's an interesting philosophical point to have in a pub one night when we over a beer. Sorry. Next question. If you have LLB degree and 2 years of legal experience, are we exempt from the SQE1 or SQE2? I think I've answered this question already. The answer is no. The LLB is an undergraduate degree, which will help you as one of the elements of qualifying as a solicitor, but you still need to sit the SQE1 and the SQE2. The 2 years of legal experience are helpful for you and would hopefully qualify as your QWE. Next question. Is there a time limit for passing the SQE1 if one has obtained an advanced SQE2 exemption? I don't think so. I hadn't heard of one. Right, next question. What sort of documentary proofs do we need to apply for the exemption from SQE2, apart from the good standing certificate from the bar in my jurisdiction? So the SRA will check with your local authority that you are qualified. You will need to have that letter of reference, and I'm not going to go into the detail of that now. We've already talked about it earlier. There are certain elements that need to be met there. There is a guidance note on the page on our website on that as well, and we offer for a small fee to go through and review that and give you a template as well. So the documents that need to be submitted is the completed form, obviously the money, the letter of reference, and the certificate of jurisdiction, a good character for you, and if your supervisor is a lawyer, for them as well. If your 2-year period is made up of more than one placement, then you would need to have those as in the letter of reference and the certificate of good standing for the supervisor for each of those to make up the minimum 2-year period. Next question. I am a lawyer qualified. I'm an Indian qualified lawyer holding a certificate of practice at the All India Bar Council. That doesn't sound like a question. But as that, you would be able to apply for exemption from SQE2, assuming that you've got 2 years legal work experience, but probably have to sit SQE1. Okay, that you've made the request. I'm just going to quickly save that so I don't lose that when the Zoom finishes. Next question. Any advice whether any of the following work experience be applicable for QWE or SQE2 exemptions? I think you've already posted this one and I've already answered this one. I have, yes. I've already answered that one. Right, I think I've got to the end of the questions. Right, we've been going for an hour and a half. Are there any other questions? Last chance for...
Hi, so I had a question. So basically, the thing is, as I said, I mean, I was the person who asked the question about the fact that, I had done a 2-year training contract in the UK and then working at another firm now. Now, when I reached out to my previous firm and the supervisors who were there, asking for a reference, the response I got was that we can't give personal references, but you can get a sort of 2-line letter saying, yes, this person worked in this law firm from X date to Y date, and they did these 4 seats of the training contract. So the question, it was quite interesting what you said about people not being SRA qualified lawyers, not being able to hold back. Is there any guidance on that I can probably go back to them on that basis, saying that, look, I mean, I've obviously done a 2-year training contract here. The least you can do is help me out instead of giving me a 2-liner, and which I don't know how helpful that would be for the SRA to determine my qualifying work experience.
Well, there's a specific process to follow to confirm qualifying work experience, which is that you would need, if you haven't already got it, to create your SRA profile on the SRA website, and then you would speak to someone in the firm. They would hopefully agree. You would then get their SRA number, and you would put in on your My SRA profile the name of the organization, the start date and the end date of the QWE period, how many months full-time equivalent that came to, and then search for that solicitor using their SRA number. That will prompt the SRA website to email them to say that they're the confirming solicitor for you for that period. Please, could they click on the link to go and confirm your qualifying work experience, which they do. Is very straightforward. They're ticking a box. Then you would get an email saying your period of qualifying work experience has been confirmed. So for them, it's really light touch, but it's very specific. So a general letter of reference will be no use at all. It needs to follow that process. So if they refuse to do that without good reason, then ring up SRA Ethics and tell them. I my phone off, so I can't tell you the number, but that's pretty easy for you to look up on the SRA website. They actually, I think, an option on their menu specifically for this. That's what you do, and they would ask you for your SRA number, because of course, obviously you've got one because you created your My SRA profile, and they'll talk you through it. It is a bit of a nuclear option, but you can use that as leverage to get them to do that. You say, why are you refusing? Oh, well, we don't like this newfangled SQE thing. So, okay, do you realize, and then I've just told you, the attitude of the SRA about this. Now there's another option that you could say, okay, if you're refusing to do that, will you at least let me get an external solicitor to confirm my qualifying work experience? Either you pay for it, or indeed I, the aspiring solicitor, pay for it. Alternatively, I'll have to go to the SRA and complain about you. And then you've got a number of options in front of them. You've given them every chance. So, I mean, that's generally what I say when people are in a situation like that, being refused. But as I said, the nuclear option, go to the SRA. Obviously, I could do the external confirming should they cooperate. If they say, oh, well, we couldn't let an external solicitor see our confidential client stuff, okay, confirm it yourselves. That's option number 1, which is the straightforward one. Oh, we don't like doing that. Okay, so you blocked off all the other avenues. I have to complain about you to the SRA. Okay, no, so my question, so do I understand this correctly then? So instead of that reference letter where they have to give, where they say that, this person has the right character, etc., whatever, all they need to do is literally, when I select the name, just click something. So they don't have to actually give me a 1-page reference letter with confirming my start date, etc. That's correct. Now, remember, this is only about confirming the qualifying work experience of someone who is not qualified. This is, I'm talking about the SQE QWE exemption. Quite different for someone who is qualified and is applying for exemption from the SQE 2. So I don't want people to get. Sorry, my question was in relation to the second bit, the SQE 2 exemption. If it's to do with the SQE 2 exemption and they refuse to do that, I don't know of any sanction because the SRA will probably say, well, the fallback is you take the exam. Because they, you know, in most circumstances, this is what I've come across anyway, this is for foreign qualified lawyers. Their supervisor is either not a lawyer or they're a foreign qualified lawyer. So the SRA has no power and control over them whatsoever. If your supervisor happens to be an SRA-regulated solicitor, then ring up the SRA and explain it to them, and maybe they'll get involved. But that's unusual for me to come across that.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to go back over where we were because other questions have come in. Is it worth doing QWE before I finished my degree, such as at the Citizen Advice or Paralegal? Definitely. Indeed, I've, for my Citizens Advice, gone out and looked for people to help as advisors, because that's a win-win situation. Members of the public, in the UK at least anyway, there's a cost of living crisis. There's so much need out there. So if you're an aspiring solicitor who needs to get QWE, bang on the doors of the Citizen Advice and they will love you, because you can provide advice, you're getting QWE, you're helping the general public, helping the Citizen Advice meet the needs of the general public. Yes, yes, yes. Right. So I have here, so I have more than 2 years experience and I'm exempted from QWE. Do I need a reference letter? Was this the person I was speaking to a moment ago, Niati? Let me answer the question. If you have more than 2 years experience and you're exempted from QWE, do you need a reference letter from previous employers in India? If that's what the previous professional legal experience, if that's where it was obtained, yes, you would do. You would probably draft it. There are specific criteria that you need to make sure are covered in that. In the article on our website about SQE QWE exemptions, you can download, and someone has obviously copied into the chat here as well, the requirements. We do review these for a charge for people, but you need to make sure you hit the requirements in order to get the exemption. They've set it out quite clearly. I think now I've come to the end of the questions. Okay, thank you, everyone. It's been an hour and a half, and I think everyone needs to go home. Some people have joined us from India and further east, and it is in the middle of the night for you guys. So I wish you a good night's sleep, and keep in touch. Feel free to signpost people to us, particularly the services in this area that we provide are the confirmation of qualifying work experience for non-qualified people as an external confirming solicitor. And then the other thing is helping people who want to apply for an SQE QWE exemption. A lot of information on the website, but we can provide a template reference letter. It's pretty basic, but then review what you drafted and remind you what you need to submit. So those are the two specific services in this area. Okay, thank you, those who stuck with me to the end, and I wish you a good night.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you and bye.